Well, welcome everyone. I think we will kick off and just let a few more people join us along the way here. It's lovely to have you join us for this event to learn more about the role of Future Flight Research Director. My name is Phil Wallace. I'm the project manager for the Innovation Caucus, and you'll hear a little bit more about the Innovation Caucus shortly. So for now, I'd just like to give you a brief overview of the event. We'll be running until 1 o'clock, and in the hour that we have, we're going to try and pack quite a lot in and hopefully make this really nice and useful for you. So we'll start off by giving you an overview of the Future Flight Challenge and some of the updates on activity there and some of the thinking of where this role came from. Then we'll be hearing more specifics about the role itself and the application process, which I'm sure you'll want to hear about. And then finally, we'll be getting some insights from a social science academic perspective. But the most important part of today's event is really your questions and hopefully sending you away with a greater understanding of this role and hopefully some excitement for it. So with that in mind, you can pop in your questions into the Q&A box at any point, and I would certainly encourage that. The more questions, the merrier. My colleague, Professor Tim Vorley, will be capturing all of these, and in the second half of the event, we'll have a panel session where we'll be discussing with our speakers and going through all your different questions. So please keep those coming at any point. So just on a practical note, this event is being recorded and we will be sharing it on the Innovation Caucus website and also likely the call page on UKRI. So if there's anybody you know who you think would be interested in this call, but they might have missed this webinar, then please do feel free to direct them there. So at this point, Tim, can I hand over to you to share a few words?
Yeah, hi there everyone. So thanks for joining. My name's Tim Vorley. I'm the Pro Vice Chancellor and Dean at Oxford Brookes University. I lead the investment, which is the Innovation Caucus, which is jointly funded by ESRC and Innovate UK. And the nature of the investment is really about trying to bring social sciences more into the innovation landscape, particularly around policy and practice. So as an investment, we have 80 members who now form the Innovation Caucus group, and we work very closely with ESRC and Innovate on a variety of different activities, trying to see that the research base really feeds into some of the kind of challenges that ESRC and Innovate are collectively trying to address, and more recently have come to work with a range of other research councils, including EP and BBSRC as well. Our involvement here, and it's great to be able to do this, is in facilitating and trying to bring together the speakers that we've got, but also trying to champion the social science insight into the ISCF, or what will be the future of the ISCF that I think many of us are uncertain about given where the industrial strategy's at. So really, rather than kind of waffling on, there's an open invitation. If people do want to kind of pick our brains, Phil is obviously the project manager in leading the investment. I'm more than happy if people after this want to pick up if there's anything that we can do to support potential interest around the research director position for the Future Flight Challenge. And if you're interested to find out a bit more about the Innovation Caucus, you can Google us. We're on Twitter, and the website is innovationcaucus, all one word, .co.uk. And please do get in touch if you want to find out more. So thanks for that, and I hope you find it useful. I'll pick up any of the questions that people have in the chat. Feel free to either submit them with your name or anonymously, and we'll pick them up and we'll report back and pick some of the ones up that perhaps we need to go away if we haven't got answers here today after the event and come back to you. Thank you.
Fantastic, thanks Tim. So time for our first speaker. So I'd like to introduce someone who has a depth of knowledge and practical experience of aviation from a background in as an aeronautical engineer, and I believe also holding a private pilot's license. So love to hear about that. So I'm delighted to introduce the innovation lead for Future Flight, Carissa Khan. Just share slides.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. So good afternoon all. I'm Carissa Khan, Innovation Lead for the Future Flight Challenge, And today I will brief you on what the Future Flight Challenge is about and why social science research is imperative for our programme. Next slide, please, Phil. Thank you. So the Future Flight Challenge is a £300 million programme to develop and demonstrate the aviation system of the future. It is funded by £125 million from the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund and matched by industry with £175 million. It is a 4-year programme until 2024, and it aims to give the UK first mover advantage in what's being called the third aviation revolution. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is the third aviation revolution and why do we need a novel aviation system? So the first aviation revolution refers to the Wright brothers first getting us airborne. The second refers to the advent of the jet age that enabled intercontinental flight. And now the third is where new classes of air vehicles with novel technologies are being introduced to the airspace. Air vehicles such as electric air taxis operating in urban, rural and remote areas. And these vehicles can feature vertical takeoff and landing capabilities and can be piloted or more advanced to operate in harsh weather and eliminate human error by having automated and autonomous capabilities. These are what I will refer to as Advanced Air Mobility Vehicles, or AAM. Other vehicles include drones that could be used for offshore inspection, surveying after natural disasters, surveillance for blue light services, or air vehicles that are larger unmanned air vehicles that can be used to deliver cargo, humanitarian aid, deliver vaccines to hard to reach areas. Now, these can be electric, remotely piloted, or fully autonomous. We also see hydrogen-powered electric and hybrid sub-regional aircraft that are small conventional takeoff and landing aircraft, making use of remote or underused airfields that can better connect regions. So the third aviation revolution will bring together these new advanced sustainable modes of air transport with traditional aircraft, operating in concert with each other and bringing flexibility to how we travel, how we deliver goods, how we provide services, and also support the UK's levelling up agenda and our sustainable aviation ambitions. Next slide, please. Thanks. So our mission is to develop and demonstrate an integrated aviation system that enables the safe operation of new classes of air vehicles with novel technologies that can provide socioeconomic benefits. So why do we need a novel aviation system? Well, the current aviation system is not fit for purpose to enable this. We already have a saturated air traffic management system that is not scalable and unable to cope with increased volumes of air traffic. Next slide, please. Thanks. But the digital infrastructure is not the only challenge to resolve. Other challenges include the lack of physical infrastructure, such as vertiports, electric charging points, hydrogen storage, the local planning and approvals required for all of this. There's also no clear technology, regulatory or operational pathways to take us from piloted to remotely piloted to fully autonomous operation of these vehicles. But one of our biggest challenges is social license to operate. And the future flight community can get really excited about the potential of future air mobility, demonstrating capabilities that improve connectivity, provide solutions to congestion, and support zero emission ambitions to address climate change. But if we don't have public trust in these new innovative modes of transport, or moreover, if we cannot demonstrate trustworthiness in future flight, then there's a risk that future air mobility will not take off. Next slide, please. Thanks. So we're tackling the challenges with a collaborative program and creating a new community dedicated to future flight that didn't really exist before. We have a 4-year program being delivered in 3 phases. The first phase is focused on, concept development, engaging beyond traditional aerospace and aviation to bring in relevant players to build a future flight community that is diverse. The second phase, which is the phase we are in now, is a development phase where we have awarded funding to 48 projects developing multiple and competing aviation system concepts. Next, we will move towards the demonstration phase, where we will demonstrate the operation of multiple classes of vehicles in a fully integrated aviation system in live airspace. And public readiness will become more and more important after demonstration when we move towards scaling up and integrating these innovative technologies into society. Next slide, please. Thanks. So we're bringing together the best thinkers, the best innovators, policymakers, city planners, regulators, radical and disruptive technologies, new business models, stakeholders with expertise in diverse sectors, and social scientists to ensure that the Future Flight Challenge is well informed as possible, especially regarding the challenges being posed by society for the adoption and integration of future flight. Next slide, please. Thanks. To recognize the need to understand levers to address challenges posed by society, to understand how society can be influenced positively and negatively when being introduced to transformative innovations, the need to identify key social science issues that future flight needs to address, for example, safety, risk, noise, and I'll touch on some of these later on, and understand the order of priority of the research required for this. We recognize the need to put social science at the center of future flight innovation and bring on board a research director who will engage with and facilitate discussions with our funded projects and stakeholders across the aviation and broader future flight community, and who will bring guidance to the challenge to ensure societal elements are integrated into development rather than sitting in parallel to the program. Next slide, please. Thanks. So we recognize that public readiness is more than just the willingness of a customer to step into an AAM, an advanced air mobility vehicle. We need to consider the perception and social factors affecting all the key players in the future flight ecosystem to maximize the potential of the socioeconomic benefits of future flight. The Future Flight Challenge completed a socioeconomic study with PwC to understand the socioeconomic benefits of future flight. And we've published this report. We're happy to share it after this event. And we also established an interim working group chaired by Gillian McBride to identify areas that need to be addressed for social license. And I'll briefly touch on some of the areas we identified and would be useful for our research director to build upon. So first, we recognize the need to consider how images and narratives affect public perception. We need to understand the impact and prevalence of negative narratives associated with new flight technology, in particular unmanned systems. If we think of how these technologies are portrayed in media, films, pop culture, TV, it's predominantly negative and has the potential to negatively influence public perception of future flight. So we need to understand what information sources public success and see as reliable in relation to these technologies. We need to understand what are the opportunities to engage more closely with the end user and non-user groups or communities to identify areas of concern that could arise during implementation and that can allow for mitigation during the design process as well. We recognize that noise and visual pollution are two main factors that could potentially block the adoption of future flight technologies. We're aware that community action against exposure to aircraft or air vehicle noise and public pressure can stop technology in its tracks. We recognize that annoyance is an established measure that is used in policy to determine community response to noise. So how can we engage and how do we engage with the public from the outset to determine what metrics are used to determine exposure? And how do we know more about the human response to noise so that the acceptable sound profile of vehicles can be taken into account in the design process to enable human-centered design? We need to understand the public perception of these being toys for the rich, toys for the wealthy, a term that I really don't like, but we need to ensure that these vehicles aren't perceived as products for conspicuous consumption. How can we demonstrate to the public that future flight can provide benefits to the wider society? We need to understand the different impacts on communities and how future flight can reduce social inequalities. It would be helpful to understand if there are positive knock-on effects where increased accessibility, connectivity, job creation can potentially boost our local regional economies and also support the government's levelling up agenda. We also need to demonstrate that future flight can be an accessible mode of transport for all, including those with disabilities. This needs to be taken into account in the design process as well. So not just for the vehicle, but the physical supporting infrastructure as well. We recognize that the public can be ready for this technology when the technology is ready for the members of the public, inclusive of those with disabilities as well. We also need to consider the innovation ecosystem and new business models when it comes to public perception and readiness to deliver future flight technologies. We need to understand how aware are firms, UK firms, of the potential value of these technologies. Do they have the capabilities? Do they have the skills to contribute to the development and adoption of these new technologies? We need to understand the public perception of future flight technologies when it comes to logistics and operations management. Are there issues around potential negative impacts, for example, job loss for drivers displaced by these new technologies? Or as more communities embrace these technologies, can we demonstrate the potential to create higher value jobs and new roles and the opportunity to upskill our workforce? We need to understand the public perceptions regarding safety, paramount importance, and risk, insurance, and legal issues as well. We also need to consider the public perception associated with urban planning or rural and remote planning and infrastructure development, like I've mentioned. Future flight will require these new infrastructure, as I've mentioned, the ground infrastructure for landing spaces, vertiports, charging points, and the physical integration into existing transport links. What is the lead time for the design and development for this? And for these new infrastructure, or even retrofitting older estates, what are the planning requirements? We have to start to engage with the local authorities, but we need to understand their perception and their readiness to implement future flight technologies like advanced air mobility. We also need to consider the public perception of governance. We need to understand how the public's trust in relevant authorities, organizations can influence the adoption of advanced air mobility, and how can we foster trust? And what are the practical steps that can be taken to allow for members of these public groups and communities to engage with decision-making and policy? We've started to see the importance of trust during our initial engagement with some of our stakeholders, where some stakeholders see decisions being made at top level that impacts them and they must react, as opposed to act upon and to be involved and engaged in the development. So we need to consider how to mitigate that, how to understand how strong strategic engagement and how we can demonstrate alignment of government bodies in aviation technologies to just foster and build that public trust. So I hope this gives you more insight into some of the challenges we have regarding social license for future flight technologies. And I hope that your thoughts and your research can help us address some of these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carissa. That's a lot of fascinating challenges for somebody to get their teeth into there. That's absolutely brilliant. So I'm sure you're all keen to get a bit more detail on the specifics of the role itself and a little bit about the application process. So we're really pleased to have Dr. Sammy Field with us. Sammy is Portfolio Manager for the ESRC and has done a lot to bring this event together and working with colleagues to bring this role together. So I'm delighted to hand over to you, Sammy.
Hi there, thank you. Just going to start sharing. So hopefully you can see that. Yep. Brilliant. Cool. So hi everyone. So yes, my name is Sammy Field. I'm a portfolio manager within the Innovation Impact team within ESRC, and I am co-lead for the Research Director Future Flight role. So today, as Phil said, I'm going to outline a bit more about the role and kind of the areas we want to cover and yeah, the application process. So Future Flight Research Director. This role will be to work closely with the Future Flight Director, Challenge Director and their team, and to champion the social sciences and economic sciences. So this will mean identifying areas where the economic and social sciences can make a significant contribution to the challenge, identify priority areas, supporting the team by feeding in insights, expertise, knowledge around the social sciences that will help tackle the challenges around future flights. And of course, we're not just looking at helping and supporting the Future Flight Challenge team, but also the wider UK aviation sector and of course the funded activities underneath the challenge. So the Research Director will be working with the team, but also helping to support and create that multidisciplinary community. identifying additional stakeholders and individuals that should be involved in the Future for Light Challenge that may not currently be there from the social sciences, in order to help tackle these challenges. And these will be individuals from industry and academia that we're wanting to bring in. And as I mentioned, working with the activities funded underneath the challenge over the ones that are currently funded and also the future ones. And this may be, for example, identifying knowledge gaps in the projects, linking ones, sharing new knowledge, and providing social science insights. So kind of scope, I think Carissa kind of outlined it really well, really helpfully in her presentation. But so these are kind of the priority areas that we've identified within the call spec, and these were taken from the social science working group led by Jill. And the priority areas, as kind of Carissa outlined, they're not limited to the ones listed here, but these are kind of the ones that we've highlighted. So around public perception, risk and then mitigation, how UK businesses need to be supported in relation to this challenge. But it is kind of one thing to remember is that the research director will be working with the challenge team to identify kind of the most immediate and arising challenges. So we know that there's a lot out there. So one of the roles of the research director will be to help kind of prioritise and identify ones that need addressing. So onto the person specification. So this is a kind of criteria looking for from the research director. So they need to be able to demonstrate a track record of research and impact that are in areas that are relevant to future flights, and they needs to be committed to multidisciplinary, cross-sectoral working and being able to demonstrate that, have experience of that. As mentioned, we'll be wanting to bring in new players, new stakeholders, and these will cause cross disciplines, and the research director will also be needing to engage with others outside of the social sciences and non-academics. So we need to make sure we have someone who has experience of that, has and enjoys doing that, and has really good communication skills, so they're able to communicate with a wide variety of audiences. And of course, this all needs to go back to the Future Flight Challenge. So we need someone who understands the kind of demands and has experience with the aviation sector, and ideally has strong networks in the aviation space to help draw in people and have an understanding of where some of these challenges are and who may be able to kind of fit into them and how best to connect people. And of course, we need someone who has a clear vision of how they'll use their role as a research director to help deliver the challenge. And then so on to funding, I think the bit that most people want to know about. So this is a 12-month position with which has £190,000 available. So most cost headings will be at 80% by ESRC. And of course, so the funding will cover kind of the usual things, the salary, research director's salary, support staff and other directly incurred costs such as workshops, travels, costs and things like that. Within this call, there will also be something that is called a flexible fund, which is permitted at 100% FEC. And this will is available basically to help support the needs of the investment in the challenge portfolio. So this may be small pieces of responsive work that kind of during the kind of conversations and discussions with the challenge team, the director and the wider kind of community, you realise that there's a new piece of work that needs to be done. So this fund can be used to kind of to address that, and also to help synthesize and other information. So this flexible fund does not need to be justified in the justification for resources document within the application process, but in the case for support, it should be outlined with how the research director will work with ESRC and the challenge team to kind of how this fund will be used and to put a clear process in place and governance to use and distribute the funds. So just touching on that, the application process, it is a normal JES application. So it's a standard grant application. It will have the kind of normal documents, so case support, justification of resources for proposal, the normal proposal form. A JES guidance document is available on the UKRI funding page, but it's not asking for anything kind of completely new. Apply via JES and follow the usual process. So yeah, onto the assessment process itself. Deadline for proposals is the 22nd of April. And it will be like other research grants, it will be assessed by peer review. And this will be, so a peer review of an independent panel consisting of academics and also users, so business users that are relevant to the challenge and to this call. Proposals will be reviewed and shortlisted at a shortlisting meeting. And those proposals that have been shortlisted will then be invited to interview. I have got a timetable for that on the next page. The criteria for this call is, does it fit to the call scope? So does it fit with future flight and the other things lined up outlined earlier? Does the applicant have the relevant expertise and resources for undertaking this work? Can they demonstrate that they have the experience and ability to work across the different disciplines and the different stakeholder groups, as well as with ESRC and the challenge team? And then how does the proposal and the applicant fit to the person specification outlined earlier and all given in the call spec? Just to note that this joint applications for this are permitted and as a job share. So where a clear split of responsibility is given, that is totally acceptable. In the JES application, of course, you can only put one person as the PI. So we need to put one as the PI, and the second co-research director is listed as a co-I. But we're expecting that the split of the role should be kind of equal, and therefore they are co-research directors rather than a co-I. So as mentioned, here is the call timeline. So all the information is already up and ready to view on the UKRI funding service. I think that's what it's called, Funding Finder. They've changed the names recently, so I'm still getting my head around it. So all the documents are available, all the information is available, but the JES submission process does not open until the 29th of March. That's when you can actually start submitting your proposals. As I said, deadlines is 22nd of April. The shortlisting panel will happen in May, interview will happen in June, and we hope to have, we want the research director to start in July. So here are just some of the important links that you'll need to the call funding page and to the call spec specifically. If you have any questions after this, after that aren't necessarily answered in the panel, please do drop us an email, iscf@esrc.ac.uk.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Sammy. That was really clear outline of the role. And I think you've actually maybe picked up on one of the questions coming in already. But if there are any more questions or thoughts or anything that you want to put out there for our panel, please do keep them coming, and Tim will capture those. So our final speaker is Professor Gillian McBride, and we're delighted to have Jill, who's a member of the Innovation Caucus and currently Professor of Innovation and Operations Management at Strathclyde University. Jill has an extensive background of research in and with manufacturing industry, and has also been quite involved with the Future Flight Challenge. So to learn a bit more about that, I'm very pleased to hand over to you, Jill.
Thanks very much, Phil, and thank you for having me. It's a bit odd because I can't see who's out there. So I'll start by saying, I'm guessing that some of the people who are in the audience do know me. And if you do know me, you might know that way back in time when Snickers were called marathons and banks gave 10% interest, I went off to university to study technology and business studies, which was quite an unusual course in these days. But that basically set me on a path where I've always been interested in that kind of interaction between economic and social science and technology. So today I'm Professor of Innovation and Operations Management, as Phil says, at Strathclyde University. And as an academic, I've always been interested in working at that kind of interface and working across disciplines, really. My own career, I've worked in engineering faculties, I've worked in social science faculty, and now I'm in a business school. So I do kind of very much kind of work at these kind of interfaces. And then in 2015, I think it was, I was invited to join the Innovation Caucus, which Tim's already outlined. And the caucus, I think, is all about supporting innovation and supporting kind of growth by promoting engagement with the social sciences and the innovation ecosystem is what they talk about. So very much right up my street. And I've been an active member of the Innovation Caucus ever since. And it's probably my involvement with the caucus that's got me involved with 2 of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund challenges. And I've been involved with Future Flight, and I've been involved more recently with Manufacturing Made Smarter. So today I was going to tell you a little bit about both these experiences. And I should also say, very recently, I have been in the exact same position as you who are sitting in the audience thinking about applying. So please do feel free to ask me questions. But I'm going to start by telling you about my journey with Future Flight. One of the things that the Innovation Caucus does is it acts as a kind of critical friend for UK RI when they're thinking about new initiatives and so on. So it was back in July of 2019 that I think it was Tim put out an email saying, who's willing to take part in a round table and meet the then new Future Flight Director, Gary, and some of the ESRC team to talk about how we might integrate social sciences. So I went along to a meeting in Birmingham, and there was a few of us from the caucus. There was myself, who was kind of wearing an innovation operations management hat. I think there was people from policy and economics, regional development. There was a number of people. And we started talking about what Future Flight meant. And I think, if I'm honest, I think Gary kind of left a little bit shell-shocked, but I think he had his eyes opened a little bit because he was kind of focused on, you know, Future Flight's objectives and having demonstrators by 2024. And then he met all us social scientists and we started saying, yeah, but have you thought about this? And have you thought about skills? And have you thought about safety and so on? So after that meeting, I was then invited to join the advisory group for Future Flight, which I did. And I have to say I'm a bit of an outsider because most of the people who are on that advisory board know something about the aviation sector, and I know very little about the aviation sector. So, but they say they welcome me because they want to include people who are outside that aviation tent. And I think I do bring something slightly different to the party. And I think I often ask questions that maybe others don't think about. I would also say that if you know me, you know my normal setting is quite positive, enthusiastic. But sometimes when I'm in this role as the social science person, the person outside the tent, sometimes I have to put on my black hat, as De Bono would say, and kind of look at some of the negatives and the barriers. Sometimes you need to pull the technologists back and say, great thinking, and I know you've got technology that can do this, but have you thought about some of the things we also need to think about? And then ESRC, I think Bruce was involved at that point, asked me to kind of do a favour and chair this interim working group. And it wasn't funded or anything, it was just people giving up their time. But we looked at how could social science get involved. And that was really what Carissa and Sammy talked about there. So again, we had academics from different backgrounds, people from enterprise, people from policy, people from science and technology, public engagement, and a number of other things. But Sammy, Carissa and Bruce were also part of that team. So we wrote a report, and I'm sure if you wanted to get access to it, I'm sure somebody can give you, maybe Carissa there. More recently, I've been involved in a road mapping activity for Future Flight. And so we've been trying to understand what needs to happen to make this vision reality. So I've taken part in a number of virtual sessions and joined different groups. And I have to say the number of times I heard people say, it's not technology that's stopping us, we need other things. So very much, I think you've got an open door there, people who are keen to involve social scientists. And just yesterday, I was taking part at the advisory board. We're hearing from some of the consortiums that have got funding through phase 2. And we were hearing lots of interesting things, from urban taxis, air taxis, to infrastructure requirements for hydrogen vehicles. And again, I've got lots of post-it notes here for where I've written notes on where I think social science could feed in. So really interesting stuff going on. So it's a great opportunity for somebody, this research director role. And normally I would be applying myself. However, again, if you know me, you know I've recently become co-director for another ISCF challenge, and that's the Manufacturing Made Smarter challenge. And Jan Godsall and myself, Jan from Warwick, we put in exactly like you're thinking just now. We applied for a researcher director's role. We did a joint application, and we were successful. So basically, I've committed 40% of my time to this new role. I've also got another ESRC grant, that's another 40%, so I just don't have the capacity. But I'm willing to support anybody who would like to have me involved, so don't be afraid to drop me an email. So a couple of minutes now to tell you about my experience from the applying side for the Manufacturing Made Smarter. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions. I should say I only started last Monday, so we're only a couple of weeks in. But like you guys, our call went out in September 2020. There was a town hall event like this in October. Applications were due in November. There was shortlisting in January. We did an interview in February, and we started on the 8th of March. So my first thing I would say is hold on to your seats. Things could happen quite quickly once they start. And if you're successful, you probably are going to start very, very fast, maybe quicker than university systems like HR and finance. Anyway, I'm delighted about this, my appointment. So I started to think about what's in it for you, or why am I doing this? Why am I getting involved? And I think there's a number of things. I think it's great being part of a team that's actually got clear objectives and trying to make a difference, in your case with flight, my case with manufacturing. I think it's an opportunity to shape the research agenda going forward. And I think it's not just about helping Future Flight and Made Smarter meet their goals. It's also, I think, about helping social scientists to find new avenues for interesting research. And I think the other thing for me is you get to meet lots of different people from different backgrounds. So, you know, it's not just about speaking to academics. I'm speaking to industry, I'm speaking to policy people, I'm speaking to people in UKRI. So I'm learning a lot about how that whole machine works. What are they looking for? Well, I think they need, you know, Sammy's kind of said the rough what it is that they're looking for. I think you need somebody who can enthuse people, somebody that can translate, because I think sometimes the social scientists and the technologists speak different languages. I know when I first joined Future Flight, there was lots of acronyms I didn't know, which might put the social scientists off, so, and vice versa. I think you need somebody who can work as part of a team, and somebody that's happy to be this kind of critical friend. And I think you need somebody who can be flexible, because even though I'm only in week 2, you do get called upon to do things like this, to be part of review panels, contributing to challenge team meetings and decisions, and you do become a bit of a go-to person. So if I think about how we put in our bids, we went for the double bubble, as Jan and I called ourselves. So we're both putting in time to it. We've also got people supporting us. And I see Sammy says you can have up to a full-time person supporting you. That could be one person, it could be more than one person. I'm guessing we've chosen to go with multiple people. But I think the kind of things you might think about is somebody that can do a bit of research. So I've got somebody just now looking at what do we already know in social science that might contribute to manufacturing made smarter. And I think there's a job like that in Future Flight. You also need somebody, I think, who can do a bit of admin, like Phil's doing just now, helping set up meetings and things like that. And the person that I'm looking for just now is the person that's going to help me with all my communications issues, somebody that's good on social media, and kind of creating that profile. So that's just some of my early kind of thoughts on it. Some of the questions I would have, and maybe we can explore this in the Q&A, but about this flexible fund, and I think there's different ways that could happen. It might be that you as research director say, here's some of the gaps that we think we need funding in, and then you start to run competitions. Could be like that. Or it could be that perhaps once you start bringing people together, you've got great ideas. Are you going to be the person that signposts them to other funding opportunities? So perhaps through responsive mode at ESRC or KTPs or whatever. So I think there are kind of questions like that that we might want to ask some more about. So I'll finish by saying I think it's a great opportunity. If anybody needs my help and support, you've got it for Future Flight. If anybody wants some of my thoughts on how we applied for the Manufacturing Made Smarter, again, happy to talk about that. But I also think with Future Flight, you've got a good team and an open door there. So with that, I'll finish.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jill. I think that's a really practical and useful look at some of the kind of nuts and bolts of making this happen, making this work. So that's really useful. And congratulations to you and Jan for becoming the co-directors of research for MMS. That's brilliant. Lovely. So at this stage, I think we're doing really well for time. So we're going to move into a panel discussion using any questions that you've got, any things you want to follow up from what's been said already. And to chair that panel, I'll hand over to you, Tim.
Okay, great. No, thank you. And thank you to all of the speakers. I think it's really useful to hear it in the way that it's been presented, thinking about the nature of the challenge from the challenge perspective, then the ESRC's perspective, and also Jill's experience there of being involved with the challenge, but also more recently on the Manufacturing Made Smarter as well. I suppose one of the things just to pick up and emphasize that I think came across in the presentations is very much that this is an opportunity to shape an agenda and to shape the kind of the future around future flight and what that looks like with regards to the social science dimension. And I think one of the things that's kind of struck me since the involvement of the caucus, as Jill mentioned, with several of the challenge funds, is that it's not there as a bolt-on. I think that we're trying to very much kind of move beyond this idea that, great, we've got some social science now. The expensive bit is what might come out of EP or other research councils. Let's bring some social scientists in an afterthought. It's very much about that, trying to turn that around. So how can we kind of shape the thinking, challenge the thinking? And as Jill said in her presentation, really kind of perhaps not necessarily just pulling the technologists back, but actually trying to challenge the way that the thinking and the kind of process around things like the kind of systems engineering works. How can we do it differently, and what do we bring into it as social scientists with a different perspective, and one that's equally, I think, come to be valued across all of the challenge funds that we've been working with. I guess my kind of experience with this as well, and I'll come to Jill to talk a bit about this in a moment, is also this need to be slightly altruistic here. This isn't just about being the research director and doing the research. It is about that kind of thinking about the social sciences and the bigger field. Sammy talked about the multi and interdisciplinarity of what's going on here. So joining the dots, I think, is one of the really key things here, the ability to kind of think beyond the domain of what your individual expertise are. Just before perhaps I go into the kind of a discussion, I just want to pick up the question that is in the chat, and please do, if you've got any questions that you want asked or posed to the panel during the kind of next 20 minutes or so, please just put them in there, and I will incorporate everything, or endeavour to. But Vicky's question there about the job share. So there's obviously a really strong social science dimension to this. We are trying to incorporate diverse applicants, but they have to have that social science focus. So I just wonder, Sammy, maybe one for you there, if you'd be able to kind of talk about the balance of expertise. Obviously having someone from industry with academic expertise has a value, but maybe a bit more on the social science focus.
Yeah, definitely. We are looking for someone who can bring in those social, or two people who can bring in the social science expertise. There has to be at a very minimum 50% social science focused. I mean, ideally we probably want more, because we've got the expertise in the aviation sector already involved in the challenge. So whilst we are looking for people who have connections with the aviation, I suppose it is definitely the balance needs to be slightly tipped more in favour of the social sciences, because that is such a big part of this challenge and is something that, you know, has great value. And so we need to make sure we're getting whoever the research director is needs to be very competent in the social sciences, and communicating that to the non-social scientists, I guess, is the importance here. So yes, very much it's, you know, ESRC led. We are wanting social scientists for this, or social science expertise, I guess is maybe the better way to put it.
That's really useful. Thanks, Sammy. Picking up on one of the things that kind of perhaps Sammy had brought in there, and to come to you, Jill. Sammy talked about, obviously, we know that social sciences are hugely broad, and just in the kind of scope, there's obviously, I think from some of the things that Chris said, the links to the business side, business models. You talked about health and safety, you talked about some of the kind of regulatory challenges. I just wondered if you got a couple of quick reflections about, given that, and no disrespect to you and Jan, you don't have that, as that they are not your specialisms when it comes to manufacturing. So how did you think about that? How did you approach that in your kind of proposal and application for the manufacturing made smarter?
Yeah, well, I think Jan and I, as I say, did go in as the two of us. And whilst we both kind of come from a similar background, Jan at the moment is in a Warwick Manufacturing Group. I'm in a business school. So I think in the last 10 years or so, I've definitely leaned more towards the social science sides. And Jan does an awful lot with industry. So when we were putting our proposal together, we kind of played on that. We said, you know, we're not completely different. We talk the same language, but we'd lean more towards different communities. So my role is more about engaging with the social science people. And I think I've probably got a better appreciation these days of how wide that is. And, you know, it's not just about business schools, it is about, lots of different types of social science. Jan is going to lean more towards when we organise events where we're talking to the different stakeholders, the industry people, and she's got stronger networks in that respect. So we complement each other, but we're not completely different. I think for us in Manufacturing Made Smarter, we're going to, our plan to engage, there's lots of existing organisations out there. There's, you know, discipline groups, there's groups that bring social scientists together, there's the Academy of Management, there's all sorts of things. So I think the research director has to work with these people. Don't reinvent the wheel, don't do things off on your own. Make sure you're getting the message out using existing communities.
Okay, and can
I follow up on that one?
Yeah, go on, Bruce, I'll dive back in.
Yeah, so for those who don't know me, I'm Bruce Etherington. I'm ESRC's strategic lead for all our contributions to the Industrial Strategy Challenge funds. And following up from that, actually in the Manufacturing Made Smarter role, in the Digital Security by Design Hub, in the Healthy Aging Research Director role, one of the key things we're looking through for the assessment process was how well do we think these individuals or pairings presenting to the panels and the interviews, how well do we think they can bring others into their process? So that's actually part of what we're looking for through the whole thing. So it's worth remembering that's something you need to respond to and something we're definitely looking for. So we're not looking just for specific expertise, we're looking at how they can draw in beyond their disciplines.
Yeah.
That's really useful, Bruce. Jill, can I come back to you just on Bruce's point there? Because you said that you had the social science end of it. And if we think about kind of 2 economists in a room, 3 arguments, we've got sociologists, we've got geographers, we've got people in kind of policy studies that might be relevant here. Could you just say a little bit about knowing that they are kind of almost known unknowns to you and to Jan in that respect? What were the kind of things that you've tried to do and you're thinking about now you're actively in post, albeit only since Monday, to bring those different quarters of the social sciences in?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were applying, one of the first things we did was we looked at what is ESRC funded already that's going to be useful. So we had a look on the website, we looked at grants, we also looked at what kind of centres there are. So that's the kind of job that I'm doing just now, is trying to kind of map out that kind of landscape of, you know, what are the key things about social science that in the Manufacturing Made Smarter community we're interested in. So, you know, what do we already know about technology diffusion? Lots, you know, there's lots of research going on, lots being funded, but who are the kind of key players that we might want to now involve and kind of bring into this camp? You know, so that's what we're doing just now. We're kind of mapping out that landscape, and I would picture that people sitting in this audience might be thinking about similar things around future flight. Our interim working group kind of did a quick and dirty kind of look at what we think might be interesting, and I think that's a good starting point, but it is just a starting point.
Okay, no, thank you for that. And just picking up on Vicky's question again in the chat, and I suppose my experience of kind of supporting the Manufacturing Made Smarter call and the event like this, the digital security by design as well. I think there's something really interesting there, that it's not about just simply rehearsing what's gone before. There is that kind of innovation piece, as Jill said, something that the kind of Innovation Caucus has been involved with, trying to pull different groups of people for different ideas and to try and do that. Sammy, or Bruce perhaps, in terms of that kind of the role for kind of reputation versus recognition, I think like all of these things, it's a bit of a balance, isn't it? We need people that command that authority and that have that presence, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are the senior person in the room. And I think that I've certainly been in situations where we're bringing together people who I look at as kind of senior professors, and would see myself as certainly more junior to some of them in convening that. But it's that ability to bring together, I guess. Is there something from your perspective that you'd want to throw in on that?
You know, I think you're completely right. It's about innovation. It's about bringing new people together. It's not just doing the same things. And I think Jill was saying, you know, it's about using kind of almost what's out there already, maybe in new ways, or introducing it to new audiences. So it's a bit of both.
Okay.
I think Jan and I talk quite a lot about our role in translating things and curating things. You know, so I think probably you're not looking for somebody that's specialist in a really narrow field, you know, and in terms of being the expert, but you need somebody who can talk different languages, I think.
I really like that. The idea, I guess one of the things that the Innovation Caucus does a lot, and kind of people participating today will be familiar with, is this kind of boundary spanning, and how do you kind of bring together the social sciences in the world with, in this case, future flight, and how that works. And Carissa, if I can come to you, because one of the things that was mentioned was around kind of communication. Mm-hmm. Obviously, being kind of embedded and in the thick and the depths of the challenge, if you like. I just wondered if there were any kind of insights that you'd perhaps kind of be able to share when thinking about the fact, as Jill said, that many of those involved with the challenge are kind of conversant with the Future Flight Challenge, and what the kind of the opportunities are to bring in kind of new dialogues and new discourses and some of those kind of fresh ideas that Vicky mentions in the chat there.
I think it's worth mentioning that the Future Flight Challenge is diverse. It's not traditional aerospace. It's not traditional aviation. So we're creating this new community where we have stakeholders who don't speak the same language. So we're bringing in, like I said, engineers in aviation background and expertise in this area, but also bringing in expertise in emerging and disruptive technologies, so AI, robotics, digital, but also we're speaking to local authorities, we're speaking to local government, we're speaking to diverse stakeholders, all of whom do not speak the same language. So picking up on Gillian's response on being able to translate and communicate across a diverse network is really, really important. And, you know, don't worry about the technological background, because you're here to work with the team and we bring that expertise. The importance is having a diverse team and diverse thinking and making sure that we're integrating social science thinking with our program. So we're here, and you'll be working with myself and other members of the team to provide you with that support and to support any gaps in your knowledge for technology. I think I'm guilty of not appreciating Gillian's background that is not aviation, because often when we meet and when we're discussing, it doesn't show. It doesn't show at all. And we're able to work on problems. She's helped me shape the Future Flight roadmap. And whilst we are, as an innovation lead, we are the big thinkers, and we're thinking of all the big opportunities and how can this bring socioeconomic benefits. Gillian has always provided that pragmatic voice to say, hang on, and to just ground us a bit. And that's what we need, a balance in thought, a balance in ideas. So in terms of communicating, it's important to have the skill to translate and to communicate to diverse communities, because you'd find that the stakeholders and members in this network don't all speak the same language.
That's great, thank you. I'm conscious that there's no other questions in the chat at the moment, and if anyone has got any quick ones, we've got a couple of minutes left. I suppose just a couple of observations that maybe the panel could reflect on, but I'd be interested if all of you would be willing to maybe just give me a one-liner at the end as to what you would encourage the kind of the applicants, the prospective research directors to maybe reflect on. But one of the things that I guess from my experience in working in this space as well is very much the fact that it isn't about kind of the status quo. It is about challenging. It is about kind of building networks, building capacity, and bringing that dialogue together. Certainly, I guess one of the reasons why the caucus and Phil and I have been asked to kind of convene some of these is because of the ability of social science to convene. We can bring together kind of different and diverse groups of people. And I guess Carissa's point there about Jill not even recognizing that she hasn't got that background, because it's the ability to apply social science expertise to broader questions and bigger problems. And certainly a lot of the things that I've been involved with Innovate and ESRC through the caucus have very much been about that. It's not just about the expertise on the head of the pin or the size of the postage stamp where you are that leading expert, but how that relates to the bigger picture and what some of the kind of big opportunities are to take it forward. So we've got a couple of minutes remaining. So if I go in the order, Sammy, I'll come to you first, but then I'll go to Bruce, to Jill, and then back to Carissa at the end. So unfortunately, Sammy, you've got the least amount of time to think through what the suggestion is, but maybe that's a good thing, given the presentation. So just give us your kind of one-liner on what you'd like to kind of see people thinking about.
I mean, for me, the biggest thing is the research director is the champion for social science for this challenge. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. That's what we want to see is that championing role within Future Flight. Okay,
great, very good. Bruce, over to you.
Yeah, so similarly, this is not a standard research grant. You're not going to be able to take the money, go away for a year and come back and go, here's my final report. So how are you going to be able to think about working with the challenge, with us in the ESRC, and with the broader community?
I think that's a really kind of well-received point. And I think that with these kind of posts, and it comes back to something that Vicky said earlier about the kind of person it attracts, it isn't necessarily the standard ESRC EP beneficiary that is the grant holder. So actually diversity of applicant, diversity of idea is really great in here as well. Jill.
Gosh, I think it's a great opportunity to meet with this diverse population that you've just talked about, Tim. And I think it's also a great opportunity to bring in younger people and early career researchers. Certainly for me, that's one of the things that I'm enjoying starting to do.
And actually it's great. So it's about building not just a discipline, but it's about building interdisciplinarity in the thematic. So I love the ECR dimension. Now, Chris, I don't know if it makes it easier or harder to go last. So give us your final thought.
Well, I think this is flight, but not as we know it. And so it's important that we bring in social science, because we need to bring the society along with us. So I'm really excited about this, and I think just to bear that in mind, this is flight, but not as we know it, and we have the opportunity to inspire the next generation of sustainable aviation. We have the opportunity to shape future air mobility in a way that will provide economic and social benefits. So yeah, very excited to continue working in this area.
Oh, thank you. I love the idea that it's flight and not just as we know it. It is that kind of the next frontier, he says, no pun intended. The one thing that I would say kind of, and obviously if you do have questions, we will be sharing the video. The slides will be available. We'll get them on the website from our end. Feel free to follow up with Sammy. Jill and myself are also open to people that want to have a chat if there's anything that we can bring, either from Jill's experience with the Future Flight as the now co-director of Manufacturing Made Smarter, or there's anything that Phil and I can bring from the caucus perspective and the members and the breadth of social science we have. I would just say that one final reflection is that I don't think anyone expects one person just to have the answer to this. And even as co-directors, it really is about going and finding out what the answers and the opportunities are, rather than professing to have them. So if, like I say, anyone wants to pick up, we are more than happy to kind of be consulted. So thank you for giving up your time and participating this afternoon. And we look forward to being in contact with you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.